You mentioned the A4M. We had our clinical director at that meeting down there for peptides. That was intravenous peptides. I know they were talking a lot about there. You also have oral peptides. I had the creator of HealthJev on talking about the
Yes,
idea of
Michael.
SNAP with, Michael.
Yeah.
And you know, in the normal kind of route that we've all known from the beginning is this subcutaneous, your own injections daily, sort of, or at least a few times a week. What are your thoughts on the three delivery systems of oral versus injectable versus intravenous?
Well, and then there's topical, right?
And topical as well, of course, yes.
And then some of them can be applied to the eye. Like it is, and we're
Sublingual,
getting
like, yeah.
like,
They're
whole thing,
finding
right?
all the ways to do it, but yeah.
So I would say that typically, I mean, intravenous is really in the medical realm, right?
Yes.
And it's not necessary for most of these peptides, depending on, and I'm going to say overarching, my first comment is it depends what problem you're trying to solve.
Yes.
Right? Will affect what mode of delivery is the most effective and efficient. Now, the good news is that oral BPC 157, which is a real workhorse, is orally bioavailable.
Mm-hmm.
For musculoskeletal injuries, it's not quite as powerful when we take it orally, but it still can work depending on the person and the situation. It's really good for GI repair.
Right. Yeah.
When you
take
take
right
it,
there.
when you take it orally, it's going exactly. And it, you know, because it originates, it's a fragment of a protein that naturally originates in the gut. So it's 15 amino acids of a much bigger protein. But essentially think of it as what the researchers figured out is this little sequence is the money. This one does a lot of the work. And so they isolated it, they resynthesized it in the lab, and by testing it on animals, realize that it's got it. I mean, if you go on to, you know, if your audience is into going to places like PubMed or Deep Dive, like these places where you can find scientific articles, the number of research articles on these compounds is astounding. Like people think they're brand spanking new. These things have been around for decades. Right? The tricky thing is that a lot of them haven't had a lot of human research done because there just hasn't been the funding, because basically the pharma companies have had their attention elsewhere, and they're the ones with the money. I think what's happening now is their attention is turning to this stuff, and we're going to start to see these peptides come back, but as drugs. Like Mounjaro and Ozempic, right? That's exactly what those are.
Do you think that's what's going on right now with the FDA already kind of putting these on a, different list? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine that it's not, but I have zero information on that. So I can't, at best I'm speculating. I think that they're too powerful, and they're, I would say they're pretty darn safe most of the time. We don't, the problem is we don't have the long-term clinical trials, the double-blind studies, the whole 9 yards. But I would say that anecdotally, what we're seeing is that they're so effective at moving the needle in so many ways that it requires investigation. Like they should be studied, right? There was when I first heard about peptides, there was guy talking about how in Croatia, a lot of the research has been done in places like Croatia, Russia, those worlds. I mean, the whole bioregulator space is almost 40 years of research, and both on animals and humans out of Russia. But there was this story of these researchers who actually, if you look up the papers, their names are on the lion's share of papers from a certain period of time, and they did a bunch of experiments on humans. But what happened was they published them, but then they had to withdraw them because they jumped the gun. They didn't do the animal experiments first and then get them cleared for the human experiments. But those experiments definitely showed that they were wildly effective at helping, stimulating healing in various tissues in the body.
And, there is some validity in saying that something like Ozempic could be used effectively without the side effects. I mean, what are your thoughts on, I know a lot of doctors, especially in more of the, let's say, cosmetic realm, using microdosing compounded semaglutide along with regulators of digestive enzymes and other things that were the concern when you're using something like Ozempic.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ozempic and Mounjaro, if they're used properly and not as a crutch,
Yeah.
are phenomenal, phenomenal compounds. Like, these are compounds that have benefits for the brain, they have benefits for the kidneys, they have benefits for the heart, they have benefits, they have metabolic systemic benefits. You're talking about a population of people that are stuck with insulin resistance. They're not moving, they're overweight, they're inflamed, they can't think. Their body, they're metabolically completely dysregulated. We have something in hand here that can almost overnight help to re-regulate things, restore insulin sensitivity, particularly at skeletal muscle. So the invitation and affect the brain centers for food reward systems, right? So now we have here's the invitation, you guys. If you're going to use something like an Ozempic or a Mounjaro, this is your invitation to change your diet.
Yes.
Eat protein like it's your job, because your body needs protein before it needs anything else. When you're not eating enough calories to begin with, if you don't eat protein, your muscle out the window. Next, if you don't show your body that you need muscle by moving and exercising, once again, it's very expensive tissue. It's going to punt it to the curb. So if you exercise, you re-educate your palate, right? Recalibrate those taste buds so that they're not overwhelmingly calibrated to these hyper palatable foods that have been, kind of put in front of us and put us in this mess to begin with. So now we learn what a real piece of fruit or a real piece of vegetable tastes like, instead of having it deep fried and rolled around and God knows what else we've done to it. And we eat good protein. Then all of a sudden the landscape starts to change, because now you're exercising, you're building and maintaining lean muscle, you're nourishing your body. I have found with clients that what's really people often can't eat enough when they're using these compounds. So we end up having to lean into things like essential amino acids to fill the gap on the protein. We may use like greens or reds powders just to get those micronutrients in without the volume kind of thing. But there's ways of hacking this. And now you have a person who's well nourished, who all of a sudden wants to get off the couch, is able to get off the couch. The pounds are coming off. There's an opportunity if they take their time and don't, I've gotten calls from people saying, well, I only lost 5 pounds last month. And I'm like, I'm not seeing the problem here. Well, my friend lost 20. Well, your friend's crazy.
Yeah. Your friend probably lost a lot of muscle mass too. Yeah.
Well,
which isn't good.
Yeah. And you're going to lose muscle anytime you lose weight.
Yeah.
Right. That's the truth. But it's how much, right? And so using these compounds at a lowered microdose is more of an anti-aging strategy to maintain insulin sensitivity, that whole 9 yards. But even keeping it at the lowest dose where you're seeing benefit for yourself, and just stay the course, steady, slow and steady as she goes. Allow the hypothalamus over time to reset that set point so that your body doesn't think you need to be 300 pounds, right?
Yes.
But that takes time. And it does take work. So the thing that nobody wants to hear, because, Mounjaro and Ozempic are supposed to be the silver bullet that's going to solve me being fat. The thing that nobody wants to hear is you still have to do the work. It's easier to do, but you still have to do the work if you want to do this properly and end up with lasting results.
You always got to do the work. That's where I always get kind of, tired of everyone saying it's the silver bullet. It was like, oh, ayahuasca will just solve all my problems. It's like, no, it may show you what you need to do a little bit more, but you still got to do the hard work. And there
100%.
are no, and that's where probably the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want to hear that, because they'll do the work for you in a sense, because they'll put you on another pill afterwards. They'll get you somewhere else with it. So it's a profitable machine if you don't do the work there, but you always got to do the work.